How was the North able to defeat the South during the American Civil War? The short answer: the South got crushed by the industrial might of the North. The North, which had rapidly industrialized as compared to the agrarian South, was producing 25 times more weapons and 6 times more ammunition than the South. Welcome to the Why in History. I am Ajay Kaul, and today we are talking about the Industrial Revolution, its origins, its spread, and the impact it had on the social and economic front across the globe. The term Industrial Revolution is usually used to describe a period in 18th century Great Britain where the pace of technological change started speeding up enough to have a visible impact on labor, production, and the use of resources. Technological innovation had started a while back, but the acceleration in the process of technical innovation that brought about a whole new array of new tools and machines, which had a profound impact on the industrial and agricultural output, was most visible in this 18th century period in Great Britain. The key element of the Industrial Revolution was mass production. Goods that had been painstakingly crafted by hand started to be produced in mass quantities by machines in factories, in textiles, iron and steel, and other industries. So what were the various factors that fueled the Industrial Revolution? One of the key factors was really agriculture. More specifically, increase in agricultural productivity. New types of equipment like the seed drill, progress in crop rotation and land use, improvement in soil health, and development of new crop varieties, all these factors contributed to sustained increase in yields, which meant the demand for labor in agriculture reduced, freeing it up for the industrial sector. On the industrial front, Britain had a long history of producing textiles like wool, linen, and cotton. But prior to the Industrial Revolution, the British textile business was truly a cottage industry. Work was essentially performed in small workshops or even homes by individual spinners, weavers, and dyers. Starting in the mid-18th century, innovations like the flying shuttle, the spinning jenny, the water frame, and the power loom made weaving cloth and spinning yarn and thread much easier. Overall, the speed of production increased and there was less requirement for labor. So with this mechanized production, Britain's new textile factories were able to meet the growing demand for cloth both at home and abroad. And because of easy access to its own colonies, Britain was able to find a captive market for its textiles. But the one invention that virtually powered the Industrial Revolution was the steam engine. People had experimented with the steam-powered engines as early as the 17th century, but in 1781, inventor James Watt brought about a major breakthrough because of which the steam engine could be used to power machinery. And all of a sudden, there was an alternative power source for the entire gamut of industries. Initially, there was a slow adoption of the steam engine, but gradually it became the standard power supply for British and later the European industry. The steam engine freed manufacturers from the need to locate their factories on or near sources of water power. And this led to the emergence of new industrial cities. With the new and improved steam engine, one of the biggest impact to an industry was coal mining, because this enabled to pump water out of coal mines more efficiently, which meant that the miners could go a lot deeper into the coal mines, and that led to an increase in coal production. And in turn, coal became the obvious choice to power steam engines. The other industry to receive a boost because of the steam engine was the iron and steel industry. Steam began to be used to power bigger and better blast furnaces, which led to an increase in iron production. There were other processes in the manufacturing process that were automated using steam, which ultimately improved the quality of iron, which led to better quality steam engines themselves. With agricultural and industrial output on the rise, goods could no longer be just distributed locally. So there was a need to deliver the goods and produce to local and distant markets efficiently. Britain's road network, which had been relatively primitive prior to industrialization, saw substantial improvements, and more than 2,000 miles of canals were in use across Britain by 1815. In the early 1800s, a steam-powered locomotive was introduced, and in 1830, locomotives started transporting freight and passengers between the industrial hubs of Manchester and Liverpool. Around the same time, steam-powered boats and ships had already made an appearance, and they were carrying goods along Britain's rivers and canals, as well as across the Atlantic. So at this point, we begin to see that trade has started going global. And that led to banks and industrial financiers rising to new prominence during this period, as well as factory owners and managers. A stock exchange was established in London in the 1770s. The New York Stock Exchange was founded in the early 1790s. In 1776, Scottish social philosopher Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations. And in The Wealth of Nations, Smith promoted an economic system based on free enterprise, the private ownership of means of production, and lack of government interference. What is the difference between science and technology? While science focuses on exploring the laws of nature, technology tries to utilize the laws to build tools, implements, and processes to make our lives better and more comfortable. And when technology becomes economical enough to be used on a massive scale, the impact to human lives is also big enough that it can be deemed a revolution. And one of the major impacts of the Industrial Revolution was the creation of the factory and the subsequent urbanization. The rise of the factory happened around the time cotton spinning was mechanized. And this led to the rise of the modern city as workers started migrating into the cities in search of employment in these factories. And the world's first industrial city ended up being Manchester, England, which was also nicknamed Cottonopolis. In 1771, Manchester had a population of only 22,000. But over the next 50 years, its population exploded and reached 180,000. By the year 1850, more people were living in cities than in villages. And the number of cities with population of more than 20,000 in England and Wales rose from 12 in the year 1800 to nearly 200 at the close of the century. And this trend was seen all around the other parts of the industrialized world. On the social front, the biggest impact of the Industrial Revolution was the creation of the industrial middle class and the industrial working class. The industrial middle class comprised those who owned and operated the new factories, mines, and railroads, among other industries. Their lifestyle was more comfortable than that of the industrial working class. Those who comprised the industrial middle class came from a variety of backgrounds. Some were merchants who invested their profits in factories. Others were inventors or skilled artisans who developed new technologies. And some rose from rags to riches, a pattern that was greatly admired during that time. The middle class families lived in well furnished, spacious homes on paved streets with a ready supply of water. They took pride in their hard work and their determination to get ahead and seemed to have little sympathy for the poor. While the rich had maidservants to look after their children, women in the middle class mostly focused their energy on raising their children. And in contrast, the working class had their children as part of the workforce. Wait, by part of the workforce, did I mean child labor? Yes, the biggest negative impact of Industrial Revolution was the emergence of child labor. Well, child labor had existed before the Industrial Revolution, but with the increase in population and education, it became more visible. Politicians and the government tried to limit child labor by law, but factory owners resisted, and some felt that they were aiding the poor by giving their children money to buy food to avoid starvation, and others simply welcomed the cheap labor. It was only in 1833 and 1844 that the first general laws against child labor, the Factory Acts, were passed in England, and under these acts, children younger than 9 were not allowed to work, children were not permitted to work at night, and the workday of youth under the age of 18 was limited to 12 hours. 10 years later, the employment of children and women in mining was forbidden. These laws decreased the number of child laborers. However, child labor remained in Europe up to the 20th century. Another major impact of the Industrial Revolution was the rise of capitalism. Yes, capitalism. The economic system based upon the private ownership of the means of production and its operation for profit. It already had political control over the colonies, and along with the rise in technological innovations, Britain saw a rise in capitalism. Factory owners and those who controlled the means of production became very rich and had more money to invest in technology and more industry. Interestingly, during those times, only the wealthy could vote in Britain. So, with only about 3% allowed to vote. So, industrial capitalists gradually replaced the agrarian landowners as the leaders of the nation's economy and power structure. In many ways, they became the new rulers of the nation. And with the Industrial Revolution spreading to other nations, including Belgium, France, Germany, and the United States, soon capitalists became the leaders in several countries around the world. The living conditions during the Industrial Revolution bore a sharp contrast between the owners and the industrial workers. A contrast between the splendor of the homes of the owners and the squalor of the lives of the workers. The workers lived in very small houses in cramped streets. These homes would share toilet facilities, have open sewers, and would be at risk of disease. And the diseases included chest diseases from the mines, cholera from the polluted water, and typhoid. Accidents in factories with child and female workers were regular. And actually, a lot of Charles Dickens's novels illustrate this very well. And it was because of this gap between the owners and the workers that Marxism was born. According to Karl Marx, industrialization polarized the society into bourgeoisie, that is, those who owned the means of production, the factories and the land, and the much larger proletariat, that is, the working class, who actually performed the labor necessary to extract something valuable from the means of production. Karl Marx saw the industrialization process as the logical progression of feudal economic modes, which was necessary for the full development of capitalism. And capitalism, in turn, was a necessary precursor to the development of socialism and eventually communism. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And the natural reaction to the poor working conditions was the emergence and growth of labor unions. Since there were very few regulations in place to protect the industrial worker, different socialist movements emerged that focused on improving the lives and conditions of the industrial workers. Workers used the unions to protest for a variety of things, and these included shorter hours of work, higher rates of pay, safe working conditions, basic education, and healthcare. One of the lasting outcomes of the Industrial Revolution was the growth of technology and innovation. Science, which had so far been confined to the lab, suddenly became a tool that could be used to improve lives. The steam engine powered railways, factories, and inspired the internal combustion engine and the automotive industry. Energy demands led to electricity and electric-based appliances, and telegraph led to the telephone, and finally to the internet and mobile technology. The beauty of this all was that in the entire value chain of the economic activity during the Industrial Revolution, from the efficient mass production of goods to transportation of these goods to the point of consumption, to communicating the demand to the factories, an industrial tool was present in the value chain to make the process faster and predictable. The success of technology also induced businesses to invest more in technology, which led to a new trade called engineers. Yes, the human resources who went to coveted colleges and universities to become masters of technology and innovation. I would be remiss if I did not mention the pollution and the environmental damage that were the obvious consequences of the Industrial Revolution and the consumerism that followed it. The rise of machines required vast amounts of energy to fuel them, and fossil fuels like coal and petroleum were burned to energize the industry, resulting in smog and air pollution. Cities were densely populated, and forests and farmlands were cleared to make room for railroads and other infrastructure. Waste was dumped in rivers without any second thoughts. And because the large corporations had become powerful enough, they were able to dictate the environmental laws governing the industrial landscape. And all of these collectively had a far-reaching adverse impact on the environment. And on that note, we end this section of the program. On to the quiz section. Question from the previous episode. Who are the top 3 trading partners of China, contributing to about 33% of China's trade? The United States, Hong Kong, and Japan are the top 3 trading partners of China. So the answer is B, United States, Hong Kong, and Japan. Question for the current episode. Who is considered the father of the Industrial Revolution in America? Is it A, Richard Arkwright, B, John D. Rockefeller, C, Samuel Slater, or D, Andrew Carnegie. Once again, who is considered the father of the Industrial Revolution in America? A. Richard Arkwright, B. John D. Rockefeller, C. Samuel Slater, or D. Andrew Carnegie? The answer will be provided in the next episode. That's all we have in the current episode. In the next episode, we look at the most important economic instrument across time. We are looking at money. We'll trace the origins and the evolution of money through time, and also look at the current disruption brought about by digital currency like Bitcoin. Till then, stay safe and keep exploring the why in history.